Moriden Athluan.
The champion of Kinneret. Moriden showed the beauty of nature by finding renewal for the great and glorious Gildergreen of Whiterun, providing a place of worship for all manner of men and mer.
The champion of Daebella, the only man to enter the most sacred places of the temple in Markarth and live. He, who found out the Daebellian symbol and returned her to the temple, so that all could hear the will of the great goddess.
The messenger of Mara, whose small words and influence sparked two of the greatest love stories of all time in Skyrim.
Moriden was at the height of his goodly deeds when word reached him of a new threat to Skyrim and its people.
Like the mighty champion of the people he had become, he looked up to the role of the people's champion once again and set off to destroy the vampire threat.
Come closer and hear the story of how he destroyed one of the oldest threats to
Still
man
searching
and
for stories about me, I see. I hate to disappoint you, but this portion of my story, you won't find a single bard who knows what he's talking about. That's fine now. We have time, my friend. I can tell it far better than they can, as they tell it for entertainment, not because it is truth. Because the truth is not what the bards would have you believe. Nine Suns Dusk, 4th Era, 201. I found Aryan in the office, surveying the damage to the facility when I returned just after dawn. Though he'd been fussing about how much work it was going to be to get everything cleaned up, his mood brightened considerably when I told him the relics and artifacts had all been recovered. Though I offered, he refused to have me remain a day or two to assist. I must admit I didn't argue hard. I do have pressing business in Markarth after all. Since Aryan is convinced he can handle it, I'll allow him to. As to Avram, I spoke with Aryan about him and we agreed that there would be no penalties applied to him. His brother was at fault, not Avram. As Jalal has now paid the price, there was no need to do anything further. I was walking from the room when Aryan stopped me again. "Does he know what you are?" he asked. I paused. I hadn't known that Aryan had figured it out, but I should have realized. The old Altmer has always been a font of information and canny thinking. I nodded slowly, but said nothing more. "And he knows to say nothing?" Again, I nodded. And when Aryan said nothing more and started opening up crates to get them back into the displays, I left him behind. Aryan I can trust for certain. He doesn't care what I am, only what I can do for him and his museum. I'd been wondering why he kept making things easier and nicer for me here, and it finally dawned on me that the only reason he would have done that is if he was getting something out of it that far outweighed the costs he was taking by setting up our relationship as he had. I can trust Aryan to do what is best for Aryan, which means keeping my secrets and making sure others who know do as well. He will keep an eye on Avram. I knew as soon as I entered the gates of Markarth that I had been correct. Perhaps it is my connection with Molag Bal through the vampire blood. Perhaps this is the manifestation of Azura's gift that allows me to sense the presence of the other Daedric lords. Whatever the reason, I knew that Lord Bal is nearby, and that meant that I already knew how to proceed. The real question would be if the vigilant who kept harassing me on my previous visits was still here, and if he was, how attentive he was. If he recognized me as a vampire, this wouldn't go well for him. Of course, it may not anyhow. This vigilant, Tyrannus, he calls himself, which is its own type of amusing, is either unfamiliar with vampires or too focused on his immediate objective to have noticed what I am. Also, I think, a bit of a coward, despite how he presents himself. He's been outside this house for a month now, or more, and only decides to actually enter when he has someone willing to back him up. Even so, that works out for me. I already know somewhat what we will find. Lord Bal. How he will manifest and how he will choose to deal with the vigilant, I cannot say. What I do know is that this is what Lord Harkin sent me to do. To assist Lord Bal. So it is that a vigilant took on a vampire as a friend, and they both entered the house of Molag Bal. The investigation did not last long. A quick run through the house made it clear that someone had been here, and recently. How they'd been getting in or out with Tyrannus all but standing guard on the door, I do not attempt to guess. As we went further in, we encountered a door, locked, that prevented further investigation. Touching it, however, set off a small chain of events, items flying off of shelves and the like, that left poor Tyrannus a shivering wretch, hiding in the first room of the house. It also left me with instructions. Lord Bal's instructions. I was ordered to crush the weak, vigilant worm. I was planning to do so anyhow, so following those instructions were of no moment. With the now cooling corpse on the floor, I was directed to return to the door and go further down, that he had a reward waiting for me. The end of the passages, both paved and raw stone, revealed an altar to Lord Bal. Floating in the air just above it was a rusted and pitted mace. Given where it was, and what it was, I could only think of one thing this mace could possibly be: Lord Bal's artifact weapon, the Mace of Molag Bal. Except for the part where it was rusting, that was not part of the legend. When I approached it, I was trapped in a cage of barbed bars, forcing me to my knees to prevent damage to myself. As Lord Bal is the Lord of Domination, forcing anyone approaching to their knees seems appropriate. He spoke to me again, and the problem he faces became clear. As he puts it, one does have rivals, even as a Daedric lord, and his is Boethiah. She has had one of her priests desecrating both this altar and his weapon, something that he could not take direct action on, as he lacked a champion. Hence his call to Lord Harkin and my own arrival. The priest in question, however, has been missing, captured, and left to rot by the Forsworn. Any other lord would be satisfied that the one responsible would be unable to take further action and be completely forgotten, not Molag Bal. He wants submission, demands subjugation. He wants that priest brought back here to perform his rites one last time, where Lord Bal can force him to submit, to give him his soul for eternity. Lord Bal is looking for a new eternal plaything, if you will. He gave me enough information to find this priest, and it will not be easy to get to him. The Forsworn have a fairly robust stronghold not far from Karthspire that he appears to have been taken to. On the upside, I read a book recently that places a possible relic of interest to the museum up there as well. At least it'll be a 2-for-1 special as I go to wreak fear and vengeance upon the feeble Forsworn. Since it was nearby, and because I still want to try a taste of Delphine if I can manage it, I stopped in at Skyhaven Temple to consult with Esbern briefly. Though he perked up when I mentioned an Elder Scroll that had information on dragons, he knew nothing of it himself. The scrolls have always been something that interested him, but not enough so that he'd ever gone looking for one. They are, he said, a deadly fascination, one that, perhaps, would normally best be left alone. He also confirmed what Sarana had guessed, that if anyone had information on them or where they might be, it would be the College of Winterhold. Once I have completed my errand for Lord Bal, then I will begin my search. I will leave the college, though, as a last resort. Having them know that someone, anyone, is actively seeking a scroll may create other complications. Lord Harkin mentioned that one had been lost in a Dwemer underground. I've read a book, recently published, that detailed a recently uncovered Dwemer ruin not far from here, a place called Arkanthangs. It might be the best place to start looking. The path I needed to follow took me through a small cave, Red Eagle's Ascent, and then out onto an exterior set of stairs that continue to rise further into the mountains. Given that Red Eagle is a prominent figure in Forsworn history, hence my interest in his sword, the second reason I'm up in these mountains, it is no surprise that the Forsworn consider this place something of a holy site, and there are lots of them to guard the ascent. They did not expect to see the monstrous visage and form that came for them tonight, and all of them together could not stop me from coming on, pulling fear, blood, and death from them at will. I wonder, when the next groups of Forsaken return to this place, what they think will have happened. There is not a mark upon their bodies, nothing to show what actually happened here. Will it still be a holy site, or perhaps a cursed place that all should avoid? The priest, Logrolf the Willful, was at the top of the stairways. He watched, helpless to affect the course of events, as a vampire lord swept through the camp. The Forsworn fell before me, as though nothing, and then that same mighty creature turned to him. He knew death when he saw it coming, but to his credit, he did not shrink from it. I took my normal form, and, in accordance with my lord's will, cut him loose. To say he was surprised would be an understatement. He knew the ties between vampires and Molag Bal, of course. Why then would one of Bal's minions free one of his hated rival's servants? I smiled darkly as I replied that I simply did as I was bid. Logrolf left the camp on his own, already planning to return to Markarth to continue his defilement of the altar there. I let him go. I had one more thing to accomplish here, and Lord Bal would be waiting for me to return as well. Let Logrolf think he had the upper hand for now. He would learn better. With the priest out of my way for the moment, I turned to the secret of Red Eagle's blade. Many of my answers were located on the corpse of a Briarheart, the male version of a Hagraven in some fashion, I think. I don't pretend to understand the magic, the purpose, or anything else about them, but they willingly have their hearts removed and replaced with a briar. What they get from this, well, supposedly strength and power. Ask this one how well that worked out for him. He carried a blade that was unusual enough that I picked it up. The real key, however, was the book nearby, describing a rite that, from the sound of it, makes me believe that Red Eagle's tomb is very close by. The sword I'd picked up may be a key in its own right. So with both book and blade in hand, I turned east and searched for the tomb. 10 Sun's Dusk, Fourth Era, 201. Midnight came upon me, and just short of my new destination, so was a dragon. This one was very different in its looks and manner. Its head had a large crest that seemed to wrap around its head like a crown of some kind. When it unleashed its breath shout upon me, I felt it instantly as like the sun's, which has led me to call this variant a hallowed dragon. Not that it lived any longer than any of the others that have faced me, mind. Quite a bit shorter than some, really. I locked its knowledge away for a later time and continued with my travels. Rebel's Cairn, the site of Red Eagle's tomb, according to the book I found, was more or less deserted when I found it. A single body was on the ground near the central pillar, a pillar that had a blade-wide slit in it. Recalling the words of the book, I took the blade I pulled off the Briarheart's body and inserted the blade. It fit perfectly, and a door opened up beyond with a great grinding noise. The doorway to the tomb was now open. Given the state of the tomb, I would guess that skeletons and Draugr will be my primary problems, so I pulled out my silver weapons once again. The tomb, when I reached it, was massive, an open structure with a large central area upon which was a sarcophagus. That would be the tomb of Red Eagle himself, with the many others around it his closest retainers and, if he had one, family. I began to approach it slowly, and it was well that I did, for the tombs, all of them, opened up and spilled forth their undead residents. I bolted back for the shadows. My vampire abilities would be less than useful against the dead. Their hearts no longer beat, and the blood within would be poison, not life, for me. I waited, watching, to see if they would search, or if they would eventually fall apart, as other summoned skeletons often did. They had the right, glow to them, I suppose, the look of a summoned creature, not one that had taken life on its own. Minutes later, the skeletons all crumbled to the ground, as I had suspected they would, which left only Red Eagle's risen corpse. The fight was nothing of the sort, as it turned out. A single silver arrow placed in Red Eagle's head was more than enough to deal with him. The flames that erupted from him on impact were on the order of dragon's flames, enough so that I could feel the heat of them from where I stood across the room. For all the fire, though, the body didn't look all that burned. That mattered little, though. The sword I sought was among the piles of offerings and materials left there to honor the man. I took them all. I'll send them to Aryen and sort through them all later. I turned and left the tomb, taking the key sword back as well. May as well display them as a pair. I returned to the house and the altar to find that the Boethian priest was already in the act of profaning Lord Bal's altar. As soon as I arrived, however, the same spiked poles shot from the ground to encase him, much as it had me. Logrolf scoffed. He'd had a few contests of will with Molag Bal before. Before I was a part of the picture. When he saw me come around the corner and stand to watch, he scoffed at me as well. And then the order came. Crush the spirit of this man, break his bones, force his submission. I grabbed the mace from the altar and introduced the priest to its pointy end. He did not survive the experience. Lord Bal laughed, and then, with a small exertion of will, revived the priest to his mortal splendor. Then had me kill him again. And again. And again. The realization that Lord Bal could do this endlessly, would never tire of it, would never stop it, eventually got through to the priest. He submitted, forsook the worship of Boethiah, and committed his soul to Molag Bal. Again the Lord laughed, and had me kill him one final time. The mace he left with me to spread pain and terror, and then left to fetch his new plaything. It was in this moment that some things clicked in my mind. I knew that my people, the vampires, I should say, were connected to Lord Bal. I knew his title, the Lord of Domination. I had always in my mind thought that meant that we, like him, were to dominate others, and that simply doing so would be enough. I now question that assumption. If he can bring us back as often as he wishes, then is his dominion over us as absolute as we would be over the mortals? Is this just not another form of tyranny? The kind of thing that I killed Stormcloak over? Or, in other terms, was the power I was given worth the potential price I would have to pay? I had no answer, and I really think I should. While I pondered on these new and disturbing thoughts, I still had work to do. I planned to look into Arkanthang's before I resort to the college, and the supposed location is not far from Markarth. I traveled up the road and found my path partially blocked by a massive wooden wall and a locked gate. An Orzamer manned the walls and warned me off. The stronghold was for other Orzamer or bloodkin, none others. Orzamer are the unchallenged masters of all things forge-related. Being able to speak with them, learn the art from the source, may do much to assist me in my studies. With that in my mind, I asked how one might become bloodkin, and I was told of a pair of gauntlets that were of particular interest to the local chief. Find those, and we would see what happened. Worth my time, though the location given is in the northern reach, in a place called Dragon's Tooth Crater. Perhaps a place where another word wall is as well, from the name. But later. I have a scroll to find and a Dwemer ruin to explore. The book was detailed enough that I was able to locate the entrance to Arkanthang's without trouble. But I hadn't even entered when I could feel the ground beneath me shake, as though something had collapsed nearby. I have doubts about how stable this ruin is, but in a way that also makes me more certain that there is something here. I know those two don't always go together, but the ruin is recently discovered, seemingly unstable, and then, paired with that, the scroll was lost in a Dwemer ruin that nobody has yet found. I'll risk it. The book hinted that there was something else to this place as well, and that may also be worth pursuing. The shaking continued as I started down into the ruin, and the first open room told me many things. First, as might be expected in a Dwemer ruin, I would be dealing with the Falmer once again. Second, the ruin is massive. I could look up toward the ceiling and see more indications of a ruin far above me. And the rift before me had some Dwemer items within it as well. In fact, as I looked closer, I realized that there was a body down there as well. Naturally, I went to investigate. Another massive shake happened before I could start down the pipes, and when it stopped, I was confronted with another ghost. This one, though, was not hostile. Katria wanted only to warn me away. She died. That was her body down there, trying to find the secret of this place, something called Aetherium. She'd spent years learning of it, looking for it. and her apprentice had stolen all her work and published it as his own. The book I'd read. She had come here to find actual proof, and died in the attempt. Now she's stuck here until she can prove her apprentice was a thief. She offered to come along as I pushed on, despite her warning, but I declined. Ghost she may be, but that doesn't mean she won't draw attention. I descended to the body and searched through it. I can't imagine how that must feel for her, standing up there, watching someone touch their formal corporeal being. She had a journal on her, a collection of her notes and thoughts on the ruin here, along with indications of 4 other potential sites. This one was supposed to be a major research center, hence the reason she started here. She found a gate locked by some kind of combination, of which I have all her notes to continue from. So proceeding further in, it became increasingly obvious that this was a very old site. The number of Falmer combined with their structures made that evident. It also made advancing quite perilous. I wasn't sure how my vampire powers would affect me if I used them on a Falmer, so I refrained, keeping myself to my more standard weaponry as I continued. I'd been steadily moving upward through the caves, moving, I was relatively certain, towards the areas I could see from the entrance. As Falmer after Falmer and Chaurus after Chaurus fell before me, I began to wonder just how far up I had really been looking. I got my answer some hour and a half later, when I saw a giant hole in the middle of the room. It had a tree dangling out over its edge, and the light reflected off of something near its end. Looking down, I could see the ledge where Catria's body had landed, and realized I was looking at her bow sitting on that tree. She'd fallen from here, it looks like, though how the bow had gotten to the edge of the tree, I couldn't answer. I carefully worked my way out to the bow, taking it, and then working my way back slowly. A serviceable weapon for certain, though not quite as much draw as my current elven-style bow. Still, it's unique enough that I might be able to display it at the museum. This architecture matches the drawing in Catria's journal, meaning that this is what she was working on when she was forced to run for whatever reason. I was about to start working through the puzzle when the ghost showed up again. She had been following me. She was impressed I'd made it this far, but wasn't able to offer much to help other than her journal and the warning that when the tonal lock, as she put it, was opened incorrectly, bad things happened. Things like earthquakes, or massive amounts of arrow fire, or ballista spears impaling you, or rock falls. All of these had obviously happened looking around at the corpses. The earthquake was personal testimony from Catria. The previous wrong guessers had some small amount of clues for this lock as well, enough so that I was able to easily get the first 3 notes of the lock. It was 4 and 5 that were doubtful, which meant that my odds were now even on if I opened it or not. I saw one of the giant Dwemer Centurion constructs behind a gate, and took a guess that if I was wrong, that would be my fate. I guessed correctly, banking on the fact that the Dwemer liked order of a sort. It paid off. Apart from a large number of things I can melt down, display, or otherwise use, the real prize was a brightly glowing blue piece of metal. Catria took a closer look and declared it to be part of a key, one part of 4, that would open the Aetherium Forge itself. She gushed for a few moments and then vanished into thin air after saying she was going to start looking at the other 3 sites, which means, likely, I should do the same. According to the book, 4 Dwemer cities went to war with each other over the power of this stuff. Even if it doesn't hold the scroll I was looking for, this is something I can use. The scrolls aren't going anywhere, and even Lord Harkin said he could be patient a bit longer. It's time to delve more into Dwemer history, it would seem. Examining Katria's notes, the only one of the other potential sites that is even nearby is one in the northern part of the Reach, coincidentally not far from where the Forge Master's fingers are supposed to be. The others are all on the other side of Skyrim, so might need to wait for some time. I therefore turned north and climbed into the mountains. I almost stumbled across yet another of the standing stones, this one showing the sign of the Lover. I took some quick sketches for a replica to be made in the museum, and then continued on.